Hello everyone. In anticipation of warmer and greener days to come, I wish you all a happy, healthy and inspiring Nowruz. As the inaugural director of the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies, I welcome you all to the Institute's special lecture series featuring Dr. Yuka Kadoi of the Australian Science Foundation and University of Vienna. Dr. Kadoi will speak on the past, present, and future of Persian arts. Thank you, Dr. Kadoi, for accepting our invitation and joining us here in Toronto. Before introducing our speaker, I would like to express our gratitude to the Roshan Cultural Heritage Foundation, the Canadian Society for Iranian and Persian Studies, and the Iranian Studies Students Forum for sponsoring today's lecture. At the outset, I would like to express our individual and collective gratitude to Canada's Indigenous people and acknowledge this land on which the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of Credit River. Today, this meeting place continues to be the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live, learn, and teach on their ancestral homeland. Leila Muslimi Mehni, the founding president of the Iranian Studies Students Forum, will introduce our speaker. Please.
Thank
Leila.
you so much for the kind introduction, Professor Tavakkoli. And it is an honor to introduce Dr. Yuka Kadoi. Dr. Yuka Kadoi is an art historian and art historiographer currently holding an Elis Richter position and directing FWF Austrian Science Fund sponsored research project called Persica Centropa Cosmopolitan Artifact and Artifices in the Age of Crisis 1900 to 1950 at the Faculty of Historical and Cultural Studies at the Department of Art History, University of Vienna. A specialist of art, architecture, and material culture of pre-modern Eurasia, Dr. Kadoi is the author, editor, and co-editor of 8 books, 3 special issues of peer-reviewed journals, and more than 60 articles, including Islamic Shenawazari, The Art of Mongol Iran, EUP 2009, Arthur Upham Pope, and a new survey of Persian art, Brill 2016, and a forthcoming monograph on the rise and fall of Persian art scholarship and connoisseurship in the early 20th century, provisionally entitled The History and Historiography of Persian Art 1900 to 1935, under contract with EUP. Please join me to welcome Dr. Kadoi.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody in Toronto. And good afternoon, good evening, and good morning for those who are on the virtual space. And thank you very much once again for having me here at this magnificent Toronto Institute of Iranian Studies. It's my great honor. So I also have more acknowledgements before I start my talk. And first of all, I'd like to thank Director Tavakkoli for inviting me. And also my special thanks to Bilal Hashmi for organizing my logistics. And for my own part, I'd like to thank the Ocean Science Fund, FF, for giving me a tremendous opportunity to conduct 2 research projects on the history and historiography of Persian art in the first half of the 20th century. And I also would like to thank University of Vienna, Faculty of Historical and Cultural Studies, Department of Art History, for hosting my project since 2019. My research has been really made it possible without any inputs and generosity from many of the colleagues and institutions. And in particular, for today's lecture, I'd like to thank New York Public Library, Manuscripts and Archive Divisions, Museum of Fine Art in Boston, Harvard University Fine Art Library Special Collections, Philadelphia Museum of Art, and also 2 Canadian institutions, Royal Ontario Museum and Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. I do my best to include 2 Canadian institutions in my talk today.
Thank you. We appreciate it at the time that we are under attack.
Yeah. So, the 20th century American pioneer of Persian art, Arthur Upham Pope, is known to have established the aesthetic criteria for assessing the importance of cultural remains from modern-day Iran. His professional achievement, together with his personal charisma, influenced the way in which many scholars and collectors worldwide came to understand the art, architecture, and material culture of the Persian world. To celebrate the 100th anniversary of the past future of Persian art, a public lecture delivered by Pope in Tehran in April 1925 on occasion of his first visit to Iran, I wish to revisit the question of Persian in art history and museology, as well as current debates and future perspectives. What I'd like to do today is not to analyze this lecture in a context of Pahlavi cultural politics, but let us consider behind the scenes of these events as an important source of art historiography. So what is art historiography, by the way? So some of the answers can be found in the mission statement of the Journal of Art Historiography. Some of you surely know this journal. And this is a pioneering journal, an online journal, by the way, dedicated exclusively to the history of the art historical writings. And this is a very interesting journal. So I just to summarize the definition of art historiography here. To investigate the history and practice of the art historical writings. In other words, how art historians were writing about art, architecture, and material culture in the past. But also to reflect on their legacy, if necessary, analyzing their shortcomings, also criticizing shortcomings. However, different from historiography, where the emphasis is made on text, it is essential for art historiographers to have actual and sound knowledge of paintings, objects, and buildings. And after all, we need to know what kind of artworks art historians were looking at when writing. So it's very important. Because art historians had a very different, understanding of, the visual arts and, not just reading text. So this is actually our role as an art historian. If we want to go beyond traditional art historical studies, we also need to know, to use, let's say not to know, but also to use our knowledge and our training as art historians to embark on the study of art historiography. Well, so on this occasion, I regret to inform that this very famous journal is currently not updating if you visit the website due to very unfortunate circumstances. The editor-in-chief, Richard Whitfield, passed away unexpectedly last spring without leaving any instructions for us. So we, as some of the advisory board members, have been discussing what to do about this incredible legacy Richard left us. and we also don't know what to do. But what is clear that this journal is still there, so they won't be destroyed and still there. So this is Richard, the brainchild, and but also we have to take into consideration the fact that it maybe Richard did not want to to continue this journal. That's also another way to take it. But at the moment we don't know what to do. So for this reason, I'd like to dedicate my lecture today to Richard, who encouraged me and also fellow historians of non-European arts to publish as widely as possible. The result of our nice collaboration was a special issue dedicated to the historiography of Persian art, published in June 2023, as you can see on the right-hand side. So I was able to guest edit this special issue. And here you see a very interesting essays, partially dealing with very historic, very traditional approaches, such as looking at one particular art historians, or looking at particular art historical debates, but also doing the exhibition reviews, book reviews, and translations. And so I was very happy to be able to work on this issue. And but this is just the one of the projects I completed some years ago. So now I'm fully focusing on the publication of my monograph. It should be completed at some point this year, or maybe only one volume, I don't know. Now let us move on to the topic of my lecture, which is Arthur Upham Pope. But of course, we will be curious about his biography. How actually Pope encountered Persian art, and when and where, prior to his lecture in 1925. So here it's very important to understand why he became interested in Persian art, why he was able to deliver such a charismatic lecture in 1925. What happened on Pope? So this is a very interesting question, and surely those who are here, why we became interested in Iran. So this is also this kind of very interesting fundamental question of the origin of course, our scholarship. So here is a very, very short biography of Pope. Sorry, I cannot write so many things. So this is just a very brief summary of his biography. He was born in 1881, died in 1969, an American citizen. And I cannot say so many things today, but this is just a bullet point. So he studied philosophy, and he became a professor of aesthetics in California, Berkeley. And then he became an independent scholar, art consultant, before 1925. So this is a big question, why he became an independent scholar. I'll tell you later. And then after 1925, he became a director of American Institute for Persian Art and Archaeology based in New York. And then after the war, he relocated his institute to Shiraz in Iran, and he passed away in Shiraz. This is a very brief biography, but I just wanted to highlight that the key here is actually why he became an independent scholar, and why he was able to deliver that lecture in 1925. So this is a very short period. So there are different kinds of turning points in his career and life. And one of the important turning points, I would say turning point one, was his encounter with Ackerman at the University of California in Berkeley. So both were studying, and also Pope was teaching philosophy and Western aesthetics. And then both left academia and then became independent scholars and art consultants. So these things all happened around 1920. So just imagine, only five years before Pope's lecture. Very short, 5 years. And so the Ackerman was a brilliant woman, highly intelligent, and though in my talk I tend to mention Pope, but please think about that Ackerman actually did most of the academic works for Pope. So most of the Pope's academic writings were, even one could say, written by Ackerman. Pope was essentially the entrepreneur, and he was a public speaker. But academically speaking, Ackerman was far equipped, better than Pope. But this teamwork went very well. So Ackerman was very quiet, very intellectual person, reserved, introverted person, but produced excellent works. Also, she knew many languages. While Pope also did not know so many languages, a bit of French. Also, crucially, he did not study anything about Iran, did not study Middle Eastern studies, nothing. He was basically a philosopher focusing on Western philosophies and aestheticians. So here also quite a very interesting question that why he became authority of Persian art within 5 years. Yeah. But anyways, looking at the letter on the right-hand side, and here we see that Pope and Ackerman already established their business. Pope for Oriental carpets and Ackerman for tapestries. So this is actually their expertise. And this letter dated February 1923, and showing that their business were doing well already. And also here, I'd like to mention why they are able to survive by doing this kind of business, even they left academia. Was that in fact there's quite a big the change in art market around 1920 because of the economic crisis in Europe. And this was mainly due to the fact that many empires also collapsed, including Ottoman Empire, Habsburg Empire, also more importantly in Eurasia, of course, the Russian Revolution. So the aristocrats basically they lost all assets, so they actually had to sell their art collections in Europe. So there was actually this kind of very big market change in Europe. So, but on the other hand, in North America, there was the emerging bourgeois art collectors. So they wanted to buy as soon as possible beautiful artworks, paintings, whatever they could acquire. So here, this supply and demand perfectly met. So from Europe, many things disappeared. But new buyers in waiting in North America. So there's a perfect time for Pope and Ackerman to run this business. So this is also very important to understand it. And finally, let me just mention that Pope and Ackerman were not art dealers. Very different occupations they had. So actually they are brokers. So mediating between art dealers and collectors and buyers. So they did not do actual dealing. It's very important. But what they did, actually, they modestly charged 10% usually for dealers and also for customers. So this was a way how they survived by doing this, the business. So their business was basically assessing quality of artworks and writing basically nowadays auction catalog essays. So that's actually their occupation. So, being an aesthetician, Pope was busily writing essays such as Oriental Rugs as Fine Art. And this is one of his interesting essays published in the 1920s. And nowadays, we don't read this kind of essay because as an art history text is almost useless because really it doesn't tell anything. However, as a text of the art historiography, this is a fantastic source. It's very interesting source. So here we see that Pope was trying to elevate the status of Oriental rugs as equal as European art. And also he was talking all about style, aesthetics, but this is what he could do because he did not any technical knowledge on weavings, and also he once again he did not study any languages, Persian no, Arabic no, also no historical knowledge on Iran. But his rhetorics were excellent. It's amazing power. He could convince people. So this kind of essay it can be reread actually. Now it's actually a good time to read this kind of text after 100 years later. Well, still it's an interesting text to read it. And then this is just one of the essays I thought I wanted to introduce. And also the one important element we have to look at in this essay is actually Pope was not really celebrating Persian rugs in this kind of essay, still kind of dealing Persian subjects as together with Ottoman and Arab subjects. So here, of course, this is a typical category like Islamic art. It used to be called Muhammadan art. This actually consisting of the Persian, Arab, and Turkish art. So the Pope in this essay was not really focusing on Persian yet. So here is very interesting why he was able to deliver that lecture a few years later. Still, he was not sure about the value of Persia, could be together with Arab, Turkish material, but this is also the way to read this kind of essay as a study of art historiography. However, thanks to his incredible network with collectors, he was able to get all the things, for instance, information about the availability of Oriental rugs and other artifacts coming from Middle East and so on, and because of this network. So he had incredible network among American collectors, particularly focusing on Oriental rugs, like very big three giants on the right-hand side. But also, Pope had a very good connection with European carpet collectors, also museum professionals such as Bode, Elahé, etc. So this is also the way how Pope got into this field of art and museums. Now, being again a aesthetician, he never stopped writing it. So he was also writing about museums, very interesting. And here we see that he got involved with the museum organization of the Berlin state institutions here, and he was asked to write about the concept of Asiatic museum for the state museum organization in Berlin, which is kind of interesting. And because being American, Pope was thought to be the good writer to promote this concept of like more inclusive Asiatic rather than Muhammadan or Islamic or Arab or Turkish or even Persian. And this is also quite an important question because now we have so many museums of Islamic art, but we still don't yet have museum of Persian art. So we have to aim it, maybe. But so around the 1920s, it was an idea to restructure this museum categorizations. But if you know the situation in Berlin and also in Europe in general, Near Eastern art, which is also the extension of classical archaeology, then Islamic art also somehow attached to it. So they're always part of the Middle Eastern material history rather than Asian. So this is very European concept. So Pope was trying to convince German museum officials, but I think he couldn't do it. So in the end, Islamic collection of the Berlin museums stayed at Pergamon Museum together with Near Eastern antiquities, still now. And then other Asian art, like India, East Asia, went to the Darwin. So this is a part of the Asian art collection. Used to be called Indian art. So still we have a division. This is also a kind of problem. But this was always a case. But the exception, of course, in North America, because North America was the different understanding about Asian art. So like the case of Freya Sackler, is a very old Freya Art Gallery of Art, already had a concept of Asian collection. Then Islamic and Persian collection had to be part of it, not part of the the classical archaeology or Near Eastern antiquities. So Pope was also involving with this kind of, the concept of museums and so on. But again, very interesting here is actually Pope was not, again, emphasizing Persia here. It's more like still general part of the big category like Asiatic art or so it's again the question here is why he became again authority of Persian art and able to deliver that lecture, this essay in 1923, so within 2 years. Whoa, it's very short. So what happened on Pope? So another interesting essay I want to feature is this research method in Muhammadan art. It's a very Pope style. It's a grand scale, statement, but it's published in Art Bulletin, September 1925. But this was published in 1925, meaning that the draft must have been submitted 1 or 2 years before. So. This essay doesn't say anything about Muhammadan art, by the way. This is a very typically Pope. But if we read this essay, this is about Oriental rugs. It's a usual stuff. But here we see that the Pope shows his preference to Persia now. So in this essay, he was trying to say Persia could be slightly different and even could be better than Arab and Turkish, and particularly Anatolian rugs. So he started having Persia as a slightly different category. Now he wanted to make a subcategory among all these Muhammadan and Islamic arts. So I see the kind of gradual shift of the Persian shift among the mind of Pope by reading this essay. But still, we don't see, why he was able to deliver that lecture. So this is now the second turning point, which is very, very important. So of course, the early 1925 was extremely important in history of Iran and also in the career of Arthur Upham Pope. Of course, the most important event should be the Pahlavis came to power in 1925. So the Iran finally opened its gate to the world. So of course, the situation in Iran changed. So this was a very, very big change. Also for the museum, the business in North America, because previously, Iran was monopolized by French archaeologists and also later German archaeologists and French museum professionals. when it comes to the foreign collaborators, let's say. But the Americans could not get into the Iranian market up to this point. But after 1925, the situation changed. So the Americans could get into this. So this was a golden opportunity. And particularly for the museums in North America, started having showing a very strong interest in Iran. So this is a situation change completely in museum scenes in North America. So then another big change for Pope was that finally Pope got a kind of title, though unpaid. So he became advisory curator of Muhammadan art at the Art Institute of Chicago in February 1925. So he finally got the title. So this was because that the trustees members of the Art Institute became interested in Iran. So now time to go, and time to investigate, and time to set up a contact with Iranians. And so the Pope was appointed in this capacity, advising how to develop the Persian art collections. And so Pope got this kind of, official role now here. And then if you look at the photographs on the right-hand side, Pope and one of the trustees, Chicago trustees members, were already in Damascus, Syria, in March 1925. So it's very, very quick. So they're on their way to go to Iran. So now we see why Pope was in Tehran in April 1925, not just due to the fact that he had to give a lecture. This was just one of the missions he had to do in Iran. And but here you see, if we look at this lecture once again, while crafting this, kind of manifesto of Persian art, now Pope, of course, needed the visual and material remains to prove his grand narrative Persian art, which was not really readily available in the North American museums at that time, compared with the European museums, which already got sizable collections of Persian art. But in North America, apart from Metropolitan Museum Art and some other institutions, there's not really a big collection of Persian art in the New World, let's say. So you see, for this reason, Pope, yes, had first delivered the lecture, but in his mind, he had to look for objects to fill the space of the museums in North America. So now you understand and hope that the Pope mission was not just a lecture. It's very complicated and multiple tasks. So so number one is of course very important, but here I'm interested in more about number two. And in fact, I've been working on the number two question for more than 10 years, because this is actually, I think this was one of the main tasks Pope began in Iran in April 1925, more or less 100 years ago. So then third task was also quite important. Because of the lecture he delivered in front of the Pahlavi officials, he got approval from them, the so-called patronage. Then this also allowed him to almost freely travel across country. So he got like a kind of permission. You can now go to look at all the sites. And not only visit the sites, but also he was permitted to take photographs. And this was an incredible thing, because even unthinkable at that time for non-Muslims to be able to get inside the mosques and madrasas, religious sites in Iran, because of course it's not supposed to be, but Pope had a special permission from the Shah to go there to look at, to take photographs. So this was the beginning of his famous photographic architecture survey. So he started taking photographs. And on the right-hand side, we see the Pope standing proudly on the top of the dome of the Friday Mosque of Isfahan. And he has a bit of particular style. No? So of course, an aesthetician, so he paid a lot of attention to his style. And so I must say, Pope was a brilliant, gifted photographer. Amazing photographs. Maybe more than his scholarship, I would say. But his photographs are amazing. This highest quality is really artworks on its own. It's amazing. And also, here is very interesting. So he mostly photographs buildings, but not really objects. Once again, he was not a dealer. So he didn't need to take photographs of paintings and objects because he had agents. But he was really focusing on the architectures and not really archaeological sites, but standing buildings, so the medieval and early modern architectures. So here we started seeing what Pope was aiming around 1925. So, as I said, that Pope was essentially an aesthetician, so he needed some kind of model. So his model was Bernard Berenson. So even after his first visit to Iran, he also visited Berenson in Berai-Tati. And here he was very impressed with the lifestyle of Berenson. And so this is the moment Pope decided, I wanted to be a Berenson of Persia. So here we go. So this is the style. So the Pope probably was not a scholar. But of course he didn't have this kind of educational background, and also he was not an archaeologist. He never had any training. But he had this, he was essentially aestheticians, and trying to make sense of his aesthetics by using Persian art, but later actually Persian art occupied his mind. So initially I think he thought that he could somehow exploit Persian art, but in fact Persian art later exploited him. So I think the power of the Persian art. This is actually many of us feel it. If we visit Iran, we can't forget this. The beauty of the country is amazing, and also, but here problem is actually Pope was not an archaeologist, not an architect, so he could not draw and he could not make a plan and anything. So he had to have some kind of concrete evidence. So later he found objects. So that actually he did. So up to now, I was maybe talking too much about this kind of theoretical background of Pope's aesthetics. But now let's move on to more practical details of Pope's formation of Persian art. They say not just aesthetics, but also the collections, actual materials. Right. First of all, I want to show you this map of the migration of Persian objects around 1925. And here we are not thinking about 19th century anymore. It's a totally different time. So three important locations when it comes to Pope and Persian art collections. So one is Paris, second Cairo, and third, Tehran. And obviously, Paris was extremely important for many aspects. But particularly, Paris became more and more important than ever in terms of the Oriental art market. After the World War I, as I mentioned previously, that because of the economic problems in Europe, so the aristocrats had to give up their art assets, including art collections. So they all went to Paris market. So the Paris became even more richer in terms of, the supplies. There are so many artworks, were sold at the Paris art market, including many Persian artifacts. But within the Middle East, Cairo has been always a very important marketplace. Not just Mamluk artifacts, but also not Ottoman artifacts, but also sometimes Persian artifacts also migrated up to that part of North Africa. And then Tehran became a new center of art market after 1925 because the country opened to the world. So the three locations. So the Pope started going to Middle East. Normally stop in Paris and then also Cairo and then to Iran. And but then here now the question of logistics. So his agents showed something, and yes, this had to go to Art Institute or shipped to certain museums in North America, but how he did it. Of course, different itineraries, so sometimes directly go to the North America from Middle East, and sometimes move to Paris, and then Paris to North America. So this is just some basic, but I think it's quite important to understand how objects moved at that time. Also, you may wonder about the Lord of Istanbul around 1925. Because Istanbul was a very important center for particularly Persian manuscripts. This was not just in the 19th century thing, but even before, due to a special relationship between Ottomans and Safavids, of course. But by that time of Pope's lecture, Istanbul's the Persian manuscripts was already got exhausted. So there's no really so-called masterpieces as such available in Istanbul market anymore. And better manuscripts with beautiful paintings were already gone. And particularly around 1900, even slightly before 1880s, the fabulous Persian manuscripts were available on the market, but all went to certain collections already by 1910. Then another important historical event I have to mention when it comes to Persian manuscript markets in Europe is the Constitutional Revolution. So from this turmoil, political turmoil, many manuscripts also left Iran, ended up with markets in Paris and all over, also in Istanbul as well. But this was not a really big supply, I would say. And then by the time of, I would say, 1915s, 14, the Persian manuscript market in Istanbul was not really, also in general, even in Europe, is not a really good manuscripts became available. So also another reason why Pope was not really focusing on manuscript was, of course, he was not really appreciating text. Also, he did not study Persian poetry. So he could not see the value in manuscripts. And also he was not essentially not a painting person. He was an object person. So he was not really, I don't see any kind of evidence that he was often in Istanbul. Hardly. He was not in Istanbul. He didn't need to go to Istanbul. So I thought I should mention about manuscript because you may think about it. But this was a kind of situation that there's no really good manuscript available anyway. So Pope was not really in Istanbul. And also he was not really actively looking for Persian manuscripts with beautiful miniatures. Right. So now looking at this, the map of major institutions in North America, which Pope was closely working together. So here you see that almost no institution in West Coast. Mostly concentrated in the Midwest and East Coast. And this is, according to my research, this is the case. Let's talk about the institutions in East Coast. Pope did not need to work with the Metropolitan Museum of Art because the Met already got collection of Islamic art, including many very good Persian artifacts. Didn't need to work together. Also, Pope had a very complicated relation with the Met. Pope had his institution in Met, not in New York, not so far from Met. It's almost very in the neighborhood. So they had a lot of problems. So they didn't need to work together. I think probably they didn't want to work together. So Met is out, but. Three important institutions Pope worked very closely in the East Coast. Number one, Museum of Fine Art in Boston, Philadelphia Museum of Art, and a textile museum in Washington, D.C. It now has a different name, not the Fleer Gallery of Art. So for the textile museum, Pope was advising busily, so of course carpets, of course, and Philadelphia Museum of Art. If you visit the Islamic gallery, you see the very typical Pope aesthetics. Because Pope was behind all this, the accessions. The Pope was really providing all the information. And then Philadelphia acquired most of it, and Boston, true. And so these are three important institutions. And now here I want to include Montreal, because Montreal has a very interesting, not a big collection, but small, but very, very good collection of Persian art. It's very good. And Pope was, of course, advising a lot. So it's very important for Canada. Unfortunately, Royal Ontario, I don't have evidence that Pope was advising to the museum what to buy. Only connection I could see so far is that Royal Ontario should have sent some objects to a famous London exhibition in 1931. But I've been asking the museum to find a list of objects, but we still don't have any information about it. I only see that Royal Ontario sent something, but I don't know what kind of objects, sent from Toronto to London. So there could be a very interesting research topic, I think. And so, so I think the Toronto, Montreal should be kind of, also Midwest, but also they should be part of this discussion. And then in the Midwest, Pope had a very, very close working relations with the 5 institutions, Art Institute, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, St. Louis, and Kansas City. And particularly, Pope started his career in Chicago. But of course, I can tell more stories about all smaller museums in Midwest. But let's move on to Europe. You may wonder what kind of relation Pope had with European institutions, apart from the Berlin State Museums I just mentioned. When it comes to the essays about museum organizations, he published some this 1923-4. Indeed, Pope was quite often in Berlin. Partially because of his involvement with museum organization, but also Pope was in a good contact with German collectors. At that time, they are a bit in the financial crisis, so they wanted to sell their collection to North American collectors. So Pope was mediating between German collectors and American collectors, particularly carpets, by the way. And then in London, Pope had nothing to do with art market in London, but focusing on academic events. for instance, very famous London exhibition, 1931. It's very important, and also Congress. And also above all, he was working on the publication of the Serbo-Persian art in Oxford. So he was often in London for running all these academic projects. Paris, of course, for art markets research, they say he had to be there often. He was there quite often. He had a lot of agents there. And then, of course, another, I have to say, very important connection Pope had with Russia, St. Petersburg, where he was able to organize, together with the Heritage Museum, the third Congress of Persian, International Congress of Persian Art, and also exhibition, 1935. It was a very important congress and exhibition, because in this congress, American scholars and Russian scholars were able to discuss together. This was a very rare moment, and this was the last phase of this globalization before the rise of course, all this World War II. And so the Leningrad, at that time called, is a really very important, this event is absolutely very crucial for my research, very, very important. So Pope got into Central Asia, in fact, through his connection with the Russian scholars. He could go farther, but he couldn't go because of the outbreak of the war. So he could go farther, but another important thing that through his connection with Russia, he was able to get to know more about the ancient Persian artifacts, pre-Islamic, Sasanian, particularly Sasanian silvers and metalwork. So he also widened his horizon when he was able to get to Russia. But unfortunately, the situation, of course, changed after 1935 and got worse, of course. Here I now wanted to talk a little bit more about Pope's periodization methodologies. Persian art. Of course, the Persian art has a long history. And he had three favorite dynasties. Number one, Sasanians. Number two, Seljuks. And third, Safavids. He loved all of the three dynasties. He believed that these three dynasties produced the best artifacts, the pinnacle of the Persian art beauty. But here is, of course, what he could do is that he could, of course, use his aesthetics to, elevate the status of these three dynasties. But because of his lack of archaeological training, but also philological training as well, the Sasanian art, he couldn't do so much, actually, though he wanted. So also in terms of the art market at that time, he couldn't find some good Sasanian artifacts to represent his aesthetics. Though he found something when he was in Russia, but also in the Hermitage collection, so he couldn't. But so he could not find the new discoveries of Sasanian artifacts, and also because of his lack of the training, he somehow couldn't do more. But instead, he paid quite a lot of attention to the Seljuks, because Seljuks could be the representation of the great medieval Persian art, and actually that actually he promoted, and also he made a lot of mistakes, which I'm going to mention. And then finally Safavids. This was, of course, Pope, and this was the highest, the highlight of the early modern Persian art. Particularly carpets. Safavid carpets for Pope is the best of everything. And So now talking about portable type of objects, Pope emphasized when it comes to these three important dynastic aesthetical canons. So the Safavids, carpets for Safavids, no doubt. Because we don't have the so-called Seljuk, Sasanian. Well, this of course there are some legends and so on, but the Safavids should be or like the. I can see. Okay, I can go on. Okay, then the Seljuk art. Pope utilized the stucco and ceramics, and to some extent metalwork, but. For him, Seljuk art means basically stucco and ceramics. And for Sasanian art, as I just mentioned, that he wished he could have used more metalwork, but at some stage he couldn't do more further, so he started focusing on Seljuk art. And here, of course, for the question is that as an art historian of the Mongol Empire, of course, I was always questioning about this because Pope never mentioned even like Irhans and Mongols. He was very negative about all these nomads, including maybe Timurids too. Because for Pope, the Mongols were destroyers of the Persian civilization, and so it's not really worth talking about. So but the Seljuk was a bit different. So and then here Pope was he was not really focusing on manuscripts. Also, later he made a mistake for involving with Persian manuscripts, but this is another story to tell. Now, he had a lot of agents. He trusted his agents, dealers. The most trusted one was Ayub Rabbeinu, very important person. He was actually the tastemaker, actual tastemaker. So he was creating something, so-called restoring objects. Sometimes too beautifying objects to fit the aesthetics of Pope. So this is a teamwork. So the Pope supplied ideas, aesthetics, and Rabbeinu tried to make it realized his Pope's aesthetics in actual objects. So Rabbeinu's biography also should be rewritten. Actually, I'm working on it because whenever I go to the old archives, museum archives, I only see the letters between Rabbeinu and Pope. So they had intense discussion about which object should be going to which direction, which institution, what should be. Rabbeinu was always got instructions from Pope. You have to provide this and this and this, and so they really created Persian art. It's a very, very important person. Here we can see how Pope trusted Rabbeinu. I see this kind of letters in the different archives. Rabbeinu is a man that I would trust, absolutely, indeed. So they really work hard, and this is just one of the evidence. This is just one of showing that they normally communicated also letters, but also cable. Probably, we don't use the cable anymore because we now got used to WhatsApp. But this is WhatsApp at that time. It's very quick, kind of quick, but not so quick. But so you see, it's very short, but it's a strong like instruction. You have to do it. You have to do it. And then here, for instance, in the cable, the telegram, Pope was asking Rabbeinu, just send the finest pieces, Gabri, where? Gabri, what does it mean? Then in the next year, the artist got so-called Gabri piece. So this is actually very typical, medieval 12th century ceramics. You can find this kind of ceramics in many of these museums in North America or even Europe too. This is one of the package Pope supplied. So the Persian arts package. So this is one of the essential piece. Nowadays we don't see this often in the galleries. Because now we have a different curation, curatorial practice is a bit different. But at that time, this was essential piece to be part of the gallery of Persian art. So here I show you one of the packages of Persian art. Is one tile work, textile, metal work, and ceramic. So this is one package for the Art Institute of Chicago. Pope was working very closely, and but this is not just a case of Art Institute, but it can be found in any other museums in North America. So it's very typical, the emphasis of the medieval and early modern Persian art, and not really Mongols, unfortunately, but Seljuks and Safavids. So, thanks to Pope's hard work, by 1934, Art Institute was able to open this nice gallery. And it's very quick. Just imagine, how this museum was really able to do it, thanks to Pope and hard work. And also I wanted to highlight this window grill, because this is, I got back to the window grill later on. And actually this is actually the gift of Pope. So sometimes he also gave objects, sometimes he put it in his own collection, private collections, but also sometimes he gave it to institutions as well. And finally, this is a manifestation of Pope's Seljuk aesthetics. Stucco, and this is one of the so-called monumental stucco panel. We have 3 of this kind, and it appeared at Market Christie's 2010, and it's now at the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. And of course, from the photos, of course, we see small, but it's quite monumental. Actually, it's huge. But also, if you look at the details, it's kind of funny. How can I say it? It's this kind of even like what is that kind of how can we explain this? All these human figures. What are they doing? And it's a lot of questions we have, and somehow artificial. If you agree with me, so something wrong with this. So by the way, this panel is, according to recent research, more than 80% are not genuine. It's a pastiche, so like compositions of different materials putting together. And so this is the reason that we see it kind of artificial indeed. But also mixing with medieval material too. So we cannot say modern artifact. It's a kind of medieval, but it's a very complex. But for Pope, this kind of stucco was absolutely essential to glorify the medieval Persian art, and also he saw Persian stucco somehow equal as medieval European art, particularly Gothic. So there's a lot of, again, essays about Persian Gothic thesis. And so you see that Pope already had these ideas, and then he needed objects to prove his big thesis. Right, so now we're going to move to the last the topic, which is about the future of Persian art. So now probably more enjoyable part of it. So now we are in a different time. We are in the 21st century, totally different time. In the past, if we visit the museum, we only see on the right-hand side, it's a perfectly shaped ceramics, perfect. we never questioned about why does they look so perfect. But now we're totally different time. So of course, if you go to archaeological sites, we only see shirts, but even not painted like this. It's all unglazed shirts. And then what happened is a between. So this is a so-called restoration. And this is a very now quite important, even in the field of art history, now becoming part of art history, not just material science anymore. So also in the university now we try to teach this properly because it is essential to teach what happened between. And also provenance is also an important question. The provenance is a history of ownership. This is another big field now emerging. This, of course, requires a lot of a visit to archives, like I'm doing this. But the restoration, history of restoration, we have to work with, of course, museums closely. And so this is very important for the future generations to understand all the aspects. It's quite demanding now, not just a visiting museum anymore, but we have to know what happened and also something between. No? And another important the kind of approach to Persian art is, of course, understanding the replica, how the replica was made. Sometimes restoration was not enough, so becoming like a replica basically. So here is just one of the examples that the restoration was not just recent the activities. For instance, in Isfahan in 1930s, there's a big restoration projects on Safavid buildings, particularly tile works. And here we have a photographic evidence, in fact. So the craftsmen were busily restoring. And then now, if we look at the Chicago window grill, we wonder, is this really 17th century or could be replica? It's a big question. But I'm not in a position to answer this question. And, but I can just, open up the question. And but this is a very important traditional craftsmanship. So restoration is still ongoing in Iran, and this is also very important aspect of, or even should be part of art history as well. So it's very important to understand. And here, the of course importance of the photographs. Particularly buildings in Iran and also Central Asia and all over Middle East. Some of the buildings are no longer extant. So we only have photographic documentation. So it's extremely important to study not just buildings, but also together with photographs. It's essential now, and more. And even sometimes one can write the history of architecture, Iranian architecture, by looking at photographs. It's really essential. And finally, fake and forgeries is a big question. And in the past, no one dared to mention it. They're kind of taboo. But now it's a different time, totally different. Now we have to open about it, and it's actually quite important to tell the real story. So, for instance, provenance also used to be kind of taboo. People wanted to hide it, but there's no point to hide it. We have to tell the story. Who owned it? Not a problem. Who owned it? And which direction pass on, and what channels, and it's very important to tell the story. So also the fake and forgery is also very important, essential to tell the stories. So, for instance, this is one of the very important fake objects, very famous, Arslan Salva. When it was acquired in 1934, it was celebrated as the masterpiece of, the medieval Persian saber masterpiece. Even forged the dates and kind of forged, of course, inscriptions. Always there was a question about authenticity of this item, and a very interesting discussion on how this also debate changed. But what is important here is actually now the Museum of Fine Art in Boston admits that this is possibly a modern day forgery, as you can see on the website. So now the many museums are now telling all the stories. So this is important, essential. Finally, of course, we have to talk about the modernity. So this is also very important. One of the Pope's shortcomings was to almost eliminate modern art from his Persian art history. For him, Khazar art, no need to mention it. For him, it's a contemporary art at that time. And so his Persian art history stopped, more the 17th century. Even 18th century, no. So this was, of course, one of the shortcomings. So of course we can criticize why the art historians in the past ignored Khazar art and so on, but now we are different time, and also we have more sources, the materials. This is actually very important. So we have a lot of sources to study and to write about, and this is a very good thing. And so we can read this, the Pope's introduction to Persian art. So this the section of contemporary art. This is a few pages. It's not a nice, critiques towards Khazar art, but it's now we are different time, and so now finally I want to go back to this Serbo-Persian art. Of course, the Serbo-Persian art was finally published in 1938 and 9. So it's not really 1925, but Pope already had this idea around 1925. So he had an incredible grand vision of the comprehensive writing of Persian art history already at that time. It's quite amazing. And then he already wanted to even publish this one or 2 years later. Of course, it was impossible, but so he already had this idea. So if we now look at the Serbo-Persian art, still useful, particularly photographs. Amazing photographs, amazing, top. Please use photographs found in surveys. It's highest quality. But here, of course, given the long history of Iran, obviously the pre-Islamic section is really thin, and emphasis on medieval section and early modern, but this was because of the Pope's aesthetics, and Pope couldn't go to the ancient chapter, and he actually depending on other scholars, and he just couldn't do. But of course he had a limit, so he couldn't do further. And also another limit he had is the geographical scope. So I don't think he had on purpose just focus on Iran. He had ideas to go like Central Asia, even China, and as wide as possible. But life was short for him, and also he was always sick. He couldn't do so many things. He was alone also. He didn't have an institution, in the big university behind him. So he was also independent scholar. Then later, yes, he was able to set up his own institution, but constantly in a financial crisis, and he always had to find money to run his institution and his projects. So he couldn't do so many things. He wanted to do more. But of course, this is for the task of new generation, I would say. Now the Central Asia is accessible more than before, and so also we can also explore like East Africa, and also other places, South Asia, definitely, and Southeast Asia as part of the Persian art history. So here the last the kind of task we have to think about is actually, so if we have an opportunity to publish a Serbo-Persian art, so what kind of survey you want to do? So that's my kind of the question for you. Thank you. So the last thing to say that my journey into Pope's Persian art began actually in Chicago when I was working as a museum curator, junior curator. So I became curious about the Pope's name found in all the documents, museum documents. I began to wonder why Pope, because before that I only knew Pope through Serbo-Persian art. So I couldn't find much. The great scholar, and then why his name is in the museum, the inventory. I couldn't find a link, and then I found a link. So actually, awesome. He was probably he was a more museum person than scholar. And then, like Pope did in 1931 and 1926, 1931, 1935, I was able to organize a little exhibition, and even I was organized a symposium. So actually, I followed the Pope system. I imitated a bit. And then finally, I'm very happy that now the paperback edition of the Arthur Upham Pope New Serbo-Persian art now is available. This is more affordable. So if anyone interested in this research, we're very happy to talk more about it because it is a huge topic. And also for my next monograph, I don't only talk about Pope because there are so many interesting people actually in early 20th century. Also, of course, I want to feature more Iranian players and also all the other players. There are many, many players because Iran at that time was a marketplace. It's a magnet. Yeah. Amazing place. It's everybody wants to go there and everybody wants to do something. So I hope we can go back to that time.
Very good.
Yep.
Well, thank you for your fascinating, engaging, and thought-provoking presentation. Really fascinating. I just want to start with a couple of questions, and then I'm sure colleagues everywhere would have additional questions. Since Pope was an aesthetician, and also Phyllis Ackerman had written her dissertation on Hegel, and I am wondering to what extent Hegelian aesthetics and philosophy of history has shaped Pope's conception. To what extent?
That's a good point. Yeah, it's
because I've spent a lot of time working on Hegelian aesthetics and sort of philosophy.
That's right.
Yeah. And which becomes the very foundation for what we may call, for a lack of better term, Orientalist historiography.
Exactly.
And then linking it to art historiography is that how does the new art historiography challenge the Orientalist? And there is a key question, because in a way that you defined Arthur Pope's career and the engagement with forgery, and in forgery you always do time distancing of the art. What is present has no value whatsoever. Everything belongs to the earlier past. So you could have craftsmen doing it now, but then you label it as sort of Seljuk art or ancient art, and then you sell it really well.
Yes.
And the other question that I have, since some of the earliest writings of Pope relates to carpets.
Yes.
And also Phyllis was also
tapestry.
Somehow
Yes.
tapestry. To what extent they were linked to carpet dealers, carpet distributors, because late 19th century, early 20th century is the high market of Persian carpet, because with the urbanization, expansion of urban centers, carpets were very prestigious to have. And I'm wondering whether they were working with any carpet dealers. And particularly those short articles that he had written on Persian carpet.
Right. Thank you very much. The first question is a very big question, so I think I need a little bit time to think about it. But it's a big question, but it's spot on. It's absolute spot on. It's a very important question. It's about Hegelian influences. Spot on. The second question I can answer rather easily. And indeed, Pope was working with dealers, carpet dealers. And but at some stage, Pope competed with started competition with the dealers, carpet dealers, because Pope saw that he knew more than the dealers. And particularly, he was in the competition with the Armenian carpet dealers. Many very important dealers. So Pope, I think Pope was very confident with carpets. And actually, this was actually his expertise, more or less. So when this comes to carpet, he was a bit, he had his own opinion, and also, though he was working with the carpet dealers, but I think they didn't get along because Pope had his very strong opinion. While objects like ceramics and metalwork, he totally was depending on his agents. He did not have any opinions. But carpet was something he, in the depths of his heart. Yeah, that's only I can say. But specific dealer's name, of course, there are many, but many with an Armenian background.
Very good, thank you. Leila?
Yeah, kind of a follow-up. I'm wondering who some of Pope's Persian interlocutors were, because the way that you kind of, you talked about the Ayub person as someone that he collaborated with, but surely he was also drawing on Persian knowledge about Persian art, and I'm wondering, or was he not at all? Was it the traditional Orientalist where he only goes back to European understandings of Islamic art, or was there Persian interlocutors that he was engaging with in his writing and understanding of Persian world?
Well, he was using a translator for all this Persian text. I do not think, one could say he was pretty much Orientalist, kind of true. I don't see the evidence that he ever tried to learn all the languages and even history. I don't see any evidence. But he had, again, agents doing all these translations. And also he was asking his colleagues to do all this reading of inscriptions. So yes, he was depending on these others.
But who was he reading translated?
Translated. And Fides was, I don't think she...
Pope himself, like who was he reading? Like whose work was he reading that was translated? Or was there...
Specific person.
Like Iranian thought on early Islamic art, on medieval art?
Partially Iranian interpreters and translators based in Iran. So whenever he visited Iran, he had all these helpers to read all the things for him. But back in Europe or the US, he was asking his colleagues to do all the work. But he did not do the real work for himself. And also, honestly, as I mentioned, that many of the writings were possibly done by Fides. That's also, so we also need to know about how Fides was working. We know that she was extremely good at European languages. I know she was able to write letters in French and Italian and so on, German too. But when it comes to like a Persian and Arabic and so on, also we don't know still. At the moment, I haven't yet started investigating Fides Ackermann's paper because again, this is a huge, but one can work on this hard paper. But then we know exactly how all this writing was made because all these drafts and everything.
And Maria, please.
Thank you very much. It's a chapter that I didn't know very much about. Although when I was in Japan, did he have any presence in Japan? Because he spent some time in Nara, and I was wondering if people were talking about him, if he was here in Nara. Was there any influence of Japanese aesthetics that may have come into play in his career?
Ah, that's an interesting question. Indeed, he was very interested in Japan, even back to his time in California. He had Japanese students, and so he was interested in Japan and Japanese art and culture and so on. But he didn't. He totally shifted to Persia. But through later, he Pope became really popular in Japan, and so his reputation was somehow, never challenged in Japan, and later the Asia Institute in Shiraz was also kind of, for instance, the Savio Persian art was republished in Japan, and so Pope still considers to be the authority, and so it's true. So that's another interesting research one can do it. So this the Iranian-Japanese relations, but particularly after 1960s, and so it's true. Yes, but gifts. Good question. I don't know. But at that time he must be very old, and so he couldn't do so many things.
Well, I want to add just a little personal anecdote. So when I was in Nara, and actually I was there with Lisa Gollenbeck, we were there for a conference, there was a porcelain ceramic place, I think it was Keo porcelain, and they were fabulous and fabulously expensive reproductions of plates with Ilkhanid images from Ilkhanid.
Ah.
And I bought something very small but couldn't afford the hugely expensive. And we're talking now, let me see, I think it must have been 1990, I have to check my dates. But I have been trying to find that place again because I would love to buy some of that stuff. But these were reproductions.
Oh.
And, no one could explain to me why, but they just mentioned Pope's name. But Pope wasn't interested in the Ilkhanid period, the Mongol period.
True, yes.
Yeah.
So that's the big.
So it was like Japan somehow played some kind of role in his life and his career.
He's later, later time. There's another interesting chapter actually. There are some stories about it.
Thank you.
That's very interesting.
That's a question, please.
Thank you so much for the talk. I have a question about the 1920s. Was he afraid of his own life and safety in Iran? Because at the time there was a sort of some conflicts going on in Iran, especially after, especially like in like tribal rebellions in Iran. So and we had this one incident in Iran, one officer, American officer, was killed.
Yep.
And did that have any impact on Pope's sort of adventures in his surveys?
That's a good point. He was really scared at some point of going into these old sites, but I mean, so he somehow managed to. Also, I think he was really passionate about photography. So his photos were really something really exceptional. So though he was afraid being caught by the officials, maybe in the prison or something. So, but he also made it somehow, made an effort. So that's also there are also some stories about this. So good point. Then Pope was a kind of exceptional American researcher at that time. Also was able to go into inside the religious sites. Previously, no, it was not possible. Though, having said that, some French and German archaeologists sneak into they're taking secret photographs. But Pope was kind of officially, with Charles' patronage, permission. So but true, he was a bit afraid of. Yes, true.
Did the Pope's fascination with photography put him in this intense conflict with Herzfeld?
That's right.
Because in a sense, Herzfeld had much of the monopoly to do Persepolis and everything else, and you had these egos clashing, and Pope sort of framed Herzfeld. And the kind of things that it seems like he was doing as a dealer, he blamed all of those on Herzfeld and caused Herzfeld, so in a sense, threatened the life of Herzfeld in Iran and forced Herzfeld to leave Iran. So the guy that you are worried about his life, he was actually threatening others who were their competitor. He was his competitor.
Yeah, so there are a lot of deep, I don't know, all these people, they're fighting with all the photographs. They are so much obsessed with photographs, archaeologists, also the Pope and all the people. For them, it's like a privilege to be able to take photos. And monopolizing it, exactly. And they put all stamps, and this is mine, authorship, mine. So Pope was pretty obsessed with his copyrights, image copyrights, photographs. Not really about all these objects he recommended, but photographs he was really fast about.
But in a sense, don't you think this is part of our age of forgery? Because photographs are not the original creation. You take an image of them, and then you produce object that you then claim to be the original.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yes, absolutely, yes. Also, he didn't have this educational training of even architecture history. No, so he felt a little bit sense of sensing the kind of inferior, perhaps, in front of like Herzfeld, with a great scholar, knowing all languages. But so he had to prove a bit sometimes.
Very good.
I'm just wondering, isn't this the great age of photography, where you have photography in ancient Egypt, and you have, it's those photographs can't even be replicated, but it seems like it was beyond.
It's the golden age of it.
Golden age.
In the U.S., photographer of Native Americans, I forgot his name.
That's true. Ansel Adams.
No, the other one. But yeah.
Please.
Thank you so much for the talk and the amazing topic you are working on. I have two questions. First, I'm curious to know how much the relationship between popes and Ottoman and their relationship with Pahlavi court and their patronage impacted their the whole career that they had. Was it more about the Pope and Ottoman's relationship with the dealers and art collectors, or the Pahlavi court, and especially Farah Pahlavi, who was very...
Oh, yes. That's another big topic.
Yeah, and another question is that, was there any process in place in terms of acquiring art in
May I
Iran
ask
for
my
the
question?
Yes, it's coming. Next. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
for the agents that Pope worked with? Is there any rule, how they acquired all these work, especially those, for example, panels of stucco or goods?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, of course, and Pope, again, I don't know much about Ackerman. My understanding that Ackerman, yes, she was mostly staying at her study for writing, while Pope was always on the move. So Iran, wherever he could go. So he was the person to communicate all these Iranian officials and all these important people. So yes, of course, he was very, very close with all these Pahlavi officials. But this is another set of archives. One has to work on it. And this is I'm right now completely focusing on museum archives. But if you are interested in this, the more Pope's political dimension, this is a really different archives you have to work on it. So, but again, it's a very interesting topic. And of course, the second Pahlavi, of course, the Shah asked actually Pope to move to Shiraz, and so of course they are very, very close. And but once again, is knowing more about it. Of course, this is a different set of archives, but it's an interesting, very interesting topic. And talking about this, the specific accession process or something. What I know that so far from all these archives I worked is it's pretty straightforward. So Pope was giving kind of a list. I want to have this, like medieval Persian ceramics. It's very short. It's very short. Ceramics, textile. Give it to this agents, and just find it. Something like this. So it's very simple. Looks very simple. It's very simple, and sometimes agents send photographs. Yes, for identification purposes. And yes, I found this, and you want to have this, and then normally starting talking about price, and then that's it. So it's pretty straightforward. Now, of course, totally different time, because now we have all these international laws, and and by the way, of course, 1925 there's no such law, antique laws. It's like international law, so it's a different time. But now it's extremely complex. It's very difficult, almost impossible actually.
Very good. Thank you very much. We have several questions online. Mr. Manik Bahujwala.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I just thank you very much for a very interesting and informative talk. I just have a general question, that you mentioned about Sasanian period art, and I was wondering, just like we have the recent, a later art called as Islamic art, was the Sasanian time art objects, are they classified as Zoroastrian art? Or known like that, because Zoroastrianism was the majority religion in those times, pre-Islamic times.
Okay, this is a very good. This is actually the problem in this the divisions of this. The Persian are divided into the 7th century, so the Sasanian and after. So, true is a very much problem. But the fact is actually some of the so-called Sasanian objects are actually not really Sasanian products. It's actually early Islamic. Many research has to be done. But when these things appeared in the market, there's no really experts, and so they just put the Sasanian. But now some research suggests that it's not really Sasanian. It's really Islamic. But again, this we have to really to change this. The periodization concept of Persian history. This is art history is very much problematic. But sometimes we cannot do so many things. I'm just an academic, so we have to fight with museum organizations to change it. But it's true. But now I think we try to see how all this museological debate also changing, and I think now we see the many changes. For instance, now there's many of the new galleries. We don't use this kind of chronological arrangement anymore. It's more about with themes, and so it's changing actually. So we shall see how this is changing. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
The next question is from Fatima Sudavar. Ms. Sudavar? If not, I read the question. Yes, her question is, Ayub Rabano was notoriously known for his forgeries, some of which ended up in the U.S. museums.
Yes.
To what extent was Pope aware of the forgery?
Yes, that's a good question.
Or did he order it?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Madam Sudaba. Thank you. And I'm trying to find evidence whether Pope knew it. And so far, I don't have concrete evidence that Pope knew it and Pope did it deliberately. I need evidence. What I can see that Pope was totally trusting Ravenel and so-called agents. And also Pope had no even kind of knowledge to say which is fake or not. It's purely this formalistic approach, so the aestheticians. So yeah, this is at the moment I don't have evidence to say that Pope knew it, and so I refrain. I avoid making strong statement at this moment. But at the moment, I could only say that he trusted agents, and he didn't do anything further. So he just mediating contacts between agents, Ravenel too, and also museums. But this is another new research topic. But if I find evidence, of course, I would tell this. But being an academic, I need evidence.
Yeah.
Also, historian, we need all evidence.
Dr. Ebba Kosh is thanking you for your insightful presentation on Arthur Pope, but wants to know how and where did Pope acquire his knowledge of Persian art?
That's right. Again, this is a big question, so it's a very short time that he somehow started using Persian, and mostly from carpet initially.
Yeah.
And I think that he was really depending on other scholars and also Phyllis, not necessarily the Pope himself. So
did she know Persian?
No.
No.
Again, using all this, the helpers. So he was able to orchestrate all the big project, but he was not the person to do a real work. That only I can say. And even to what extent he knew Persian art, that's the big question, the Persian history. But he had this, he was a spokesman basically, so he was representing, but someone provided all this knowledge. So yeah, this is always my big question, and why he was able to deliver that kind of lecture. So always I'm thinking why, and being an aesthetician, why it's possible.
So he has a grand narrative of some sort to tell, and he puts things in it and
that's right.
Crafts it.
Crafting, yes.
Forges.
Forging narratives. That's right.
Yeah.
And he was very good at this.
Yeah.
So putting all this, and but the actual knowledge of Persian is doubtful. But once again, we have to read all these Ackerman papers. Maybe then we know more about it, because Ackerman, she was really working with academics. She was a person doing all edits. She was communicating with all these scholars too. So Pope was not a person who reads all this real academic writings and all. The next step would be to study this Ackerman paper. So this is again huge archives.
Just one more question online. Karen Pento says, "Bravo, Yuka. And thank you for your amazingly and learned presentation." She asks, how did he and Phyllis produce so many volumes without institutional support?
That is a...
Independent scholars are the best and produce the most.
Maybe.
original work.
Maybe, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Yes, they didn't have any institutional support, nothing. Just what
Except Chicago.
Chicago, but again unpaid. So Pope didn't get any money, and so this kind of freedom sometimes, could be better for them to work without any kind of like bureaucratic procedures, perhaps. In terms of fundraisings, yes, Pope was extremely busy doing all fundraisings. He was constantly asking, please, 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 please. The Phyllis was writing, and so and then of all the agents, friends, and so maybe sometimes this freedom actually, could be better. In the independent status is maybe better than.
Please.
My question concerns the establishment of museums. Since you referred to, museums under different titles and by different nationalities, I wanted to know about if the Center of Art established in Morocco during the Qajar period by one of the most famous Iranians, princes,
Yes,
can be regarded as a sort of museum, as a sort of, and if I'm not mistaken, the title was Danishkade, Prince.
Yes.
He was a famous politician who collected the money through the workers who were in Baku. He got rich and spent his money through collection of artistic items, and created that in Morocco. I don't know whether anyone, dear professor, if you have got, please inform me. I don't.
Turn to you.
I think that when you can call a collection museum, that it's open to the public. Before that, you cannot call it a museum.
So it's not open to me. In Morocco, it is not open.
Most of the time, no. It's like a private collection. Maybe specific people have access to that collection through through the connection that they have with the collector or something. But most of the time, when it's publicly open and everyone can have access, you can call it a museum. I think.
Very good. And you ask your own question, please. Sorry.
My question regards the question that also Fahim asked, and I wanted to ask how was Pope's connection and relationship with Godard and with Schmidt inside of and also Herzfeld inside of Iran affected his career. And also I have another question, that because sort of Arthur Pope was the first person that published sort of brochure catalog regarding the art books exhibited at the Ancient Museum of Iran in that time, after the opening. He was the first one who published something and explained about the artworks. And also he added lots of beautiful photos regarding the artwork and the exhibition itself into his article. Among his documents, could you find something like a contract or sort of things like a contract regarding the monopoly of taking photos of artworks inside of Iran?
That's a good point. Evidence, another evidence. Letter. The first question about Pope's kind of friendship, or whatever you call it, libraries with Godard and Herzfeld. Herzfeld, of course, they didn't like each other. Basically, they didn't like each other. About this photographs, of course, Pope famously had an argument with Herzfeld and Godard. In fact, my impression right now is actually Godard was kind of more ignoring, Pope. like this kind of French way, you know, like not worth, you know, paying attention. I don't know. That's my impression because I haven't yet studied the Godard papers, but I'm going to visit the Godard archives. That's my impression at the moment because I don't see this the intense like discussion from the Pope's side. Like for instance, Pope papers. Yes, I've seen like letters from Godard. But it's very like official, you know. It's not like a personal kind of emotional things. I don't see it. While between Herzfeld and the Pope, I see a lot of this kind of emotional stuff. Really, they fight. But Godard at the moment, I don't know. So I'm curious about this. Their personal relationships. But now Godard archives is now open finally, so we can visit. And so we all can visit, and we can learn more about it, what really happened in there, personal level. And about this, the official permission letter, I don't know at the moment, but it's a good point. Maybe somewhere in Iran, but I don't know.
Because those photos sort of are first photos of the National Museum of Iran, in that time, ancient museum of Iran. And the very first brochure catalog about the museum after the opening.
Right. Also, another thing I have to mention that, of course, Pope's photos had to be censored by the Pahlavi officials. Yes. Before, if Pope wanted to bring photos out of the country, out of Iran, to like America or wherever, Paris. So before, you know, Pope please, I want to bring back to U.S. No, had to be checked quality, because of course the Shah wanted to make sure that only the beautiful image of Iran could be exposed. So yes, so there's this is I know the stories. So, but I think Pope, in general, he was very good at photos, not just because of censorship, but.
The next question online, Sam Saleh Sami, please.
Hi, thank you very much for the great presentation. It was very inspiring. My question is about the concept of abstract form in Pope's writings and scholarship, especially because it's, I think, on one hand, quite very glorifying the history of Persian art. On the other hand, I wonder how you have thought through it, if you have come
This
across
is
it.
from Victor, our
it's
colleague.
also
He says
very
that.
interesting to me because it's very much paid attention to nowadays in Persian writing on Persian history.
Is that the way it's placed? Has anything to do with that? Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. It's true. If we read Pope's writings, yes, it's sometimes we don't understand anything. Can you imagine when it was published in like the 1920s? How it was read. This is a very interesting question. But from now, for us, it's almost something impossible. The real impact of his writing is quite a big question actually. But for instance, like a survey of Persian art, Pope contributed some chapters. I think Pope's writings in the survey must have been edited by Phyllis, so kind of readable. We can read it. But all of this carpet stuff is just, we can't read it. So it's true, what is the real impact, but also, you see, maybe content was not so important, but just to publish, this was probably more important for Pope, maybe, to put all this fancy title, hoping that no one would read it. But
the content.
The title is very important, so the content, forget.
The abstract idea is important.
Very important. So the
fancy,
catchy words, but not in the contents. That's my opinion. But, yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was a great learning. An area of interest of mine is so-called two centuries of silence just before Seljuks.
Oh, yes,
and
it's
also after the Sassanid, that you didn't have any mention about that. Of course, it's 200 years of silence.
Silence.
So I was just wondering, through your research, did you, and especially
Pope?
through Pope, is there any mention, is there any artworks that he encountered?
That's a good question. In fact, I think he put everything, all of this, the 2nd century silence materials under the category of Sasanian, I think.
Oh.
I guess so. Or even like Seljuks, because he could not, he couldn't distinguish. So for him, like on these 3 categories, quite important. So didn't need to have some more categories. In fact, he didn't need. If we look at like a Serbian Persian art, it's true. The pre-Seljuk materials are not really featured, and also Mongols, no. Bit of Timurids, but not much. So this period is very important. We need to know more about it. It's totally still ignored, actually.
Just a follow-up. So there might be possibility of some artworks that are miscategorized into later period.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. Because even this the Mongol period. The scholarship began even just some 20, 30 years ago. The field was not really kind of ignored. No one cared about. So we still have so many things to do, and so it could be interesting to look at all these things once again, like a Serbian Persian, and there are so many miscategories. Yeah.
Please.
Thank you so much for your illuminating talk. I have a question in regard to how Pope was aware of the internal political situation in Iran, especially the nationalization. Because when you came across nationalization, you're talking about the ancient history. So in his categorization, he actually mentioned about the Sasanian dynasty. So I wanted to see, how he was really aware of that.
That's also. He was involved with all this, the project of national heritage, of course, and so that was one of his roles, of course, the official roles, and for this his role, I have to say that I'm not really working on, because I'm really focusing on museums at the moment. But another interesting question that though he provided all this, like as I say, package. Maybe this package was approved as like a representation of the Iranian cultural heritage, probably. But again, I need evidence. But because it was allowed to leave the country, if ever found in Iran. So that's of course an interesting question. But his more involvement with all this, the national project of the heritage project, again we have to work on a completely different set of archives. Big topic. I won't be able to do maybe in my life.
There's someone who's working on it.
That is very good. So that is really
Joanna Sarmelli.
Very good.
Well, thank you very much. Karen Pento notes that she doubts that Pope and Phyllis knew about the forgeries. And she goes, explains. Well, please join me to thank our wonderful speaker. Very thoughtful. Enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Again, wishing you happy Nowruz and enjoyable spring to come. Bye.